Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Basketbros. Last week, I took the week off because I had some business to attend to up in Daytona with the Tortugas. Happy to announce that I got three good interviews with Andrew Graham, the manager of the Lakeland Flying Tigers. If you're a baseball fan, Lenny Harris, the all-time pinch hitting record, as well as Willie Blair. But back to basketball. Have a great show. This is part two of our series. But tonight we focus on what players in today's NBA would not make it in the good old days, the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. We have a good group on here. But the best part about the whole thing is I got a great crew. We're going to bring them in one at a time. So here they are, one at a time. All right, let's go out there and do it. Who is first?
Me.
All right, Mr. Houston Rocket, Mr. Houston, a lot of things. Welcome back, Dens. I'm sitting in your chair again a little bit, but who cares? You know what? Anytime I get the opportunity to lead this incredible crew, I am more than happy to do it. So,
Hey, there you go, man.
Ready for a great show, partner?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been kind of looking forward since the last. Those of y'all who did not catch the last one, it was about 2 weeks ago. Go check it out. If you have Stream TV, I'll be loading that episode on there and then letting you know when you can catch the replay of it. It's really great. It's the one last time was those who would have made it back then, and well, tonight is the opposite. So there you go.
Yeah, and I should point out to our audience too that we're gonna in the future, Basketbros is going to also feature a lot of incredible lists because I feel that lists are as good as regular topics. But the best part about the whole thing is they create more debate amongst eras. And I don't know about you, Denz, but I think we struck gold with this idea, and I think we're going to continue to play it up if you guys and the rest of them don't mind.
We definitely should. We definitely should keep it going. Definitely looking forward to it.
All right, so who's next?
This little liar over here.
Yeah, this guy. All right, well, I've got a great one for you here with this guy, Will Vogel. Welcome back. The guy, to me, does more waffling on shows that he can't get on more than Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. But you know what, though? Will Vogel, we still love you. And, since we have a Vogel sighting here, the Phoenix Suns have one, too, with Frank Vogel, who has been announced as a new coach, given a 5-year deal with the Phoenix Suns. So, I don't know a whole lot about math, but we got Vogel to the second power, and I don't know what line of math it is, but we got.
I always joke around saying it's my Uncle Frank, but I don't have an Uncle Frank.
All right, well, you know what, though? Fake it till you make it. We got Will Vogel here, and Phoenix gets Frank Vogel. And last but not least, the guy that'll be on No Limits tomorrow night.
Yep.
Will be on the big show, No Limits. His name is Jacob Christner.
You better believe it. And by the way, the only Uncle Frank that matters is Macaulay Culkin's Uncle Frank on Home Alone.
There you go.
Who was really, really cheap and didn't want to pay for anything and took trips for nothing.
Hey, there you go.
Exactly.
Just to give you a little bit of a preview, though, about tomorrow night, Jacob Christner and I are going to do a one-on-one interview. Only I'm the guy doling out the questions. So that show should probably be on the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel at approximately 8:15, 8:30 local time in that neighborhood. It depends on what kind of havoc I'm causing on the street here in South Florida. But I've been looking forward to doing one with Jacob. He was kind enough to put me on Abundant Views. So I encourage anybody that could go out there and watch my show with Jacob Christner, No Limits. And
I'll be there.
Let me tell you, No Limits is starting to take on a new meaning here because I'm doing a lot of great one-on-one interviews. And if you guys don't mind, I want to emphasize that yesterday on The Real and the Rare, we had a great book with one of my Coral Springs Chamber people, Irma Perone. She's great. She talks about winning and wrote a book on WinX. And prior to that, on Thursday night, I had the Sales Bounty Hunter, who gives you some great pointing tips here about resumes and what employers should look for. So that's why, Will, I've asked you to kind of watch it. So those are on the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. Now that I've kept you guys out there, we're going to talk about it again. What players could not make it in the 80s, 90s, and early in this decade? And let's start off with them. All right. I'll read them off, and then everybody gets a chance to comment on them. Number one, Dylan Brooks, Denzel.
Ooh, Dylan, who seemingly has become the villain of basketball, and it ended up backfiring in his favor. Now, everyone knows the narrative. He essentially poked the bear, proverbially. He taunted LeBron, and he went on record saying he doesn't respect him unless he gives him 40. And then the Grizzlies proceed to lose the series. Brooks had a poor outing. LeBron gave him 40, well, not 40 points. He gave him 20 points and 20 rebounds. And not only that, but the Memphis Grizzlies announced shortly after that they would not be re-signing Dylan Brooks. Now, you take a guy like Dylan Brooks just off of what he had done this season, his antics, the previous season and whatnot. Okay, here's the deal. You stick him in the 80s with a Bird, with a Jordan, with an Isaiah, with a Joe Dumars, with Magic, with Kareem, and how many of those guys would have shown him up? Because what LeBron did was actually minuscule compared to what those guys would have done. Imagine if I'll ask you something, Jacob, and then we can swing it to you. Imagine if Dylan Brooks would have talked trash to Jordan and Jordan dropped 63 of them.
No.
63 on Brooks' head.
Yeah.
How do you think that would have gone over?
It would have been a Tuesday in November. It's just the truth. But this thing with Dylan Brooks, he'd be maybe 3 years, and then the 2 of the years on the 10th, 11th man on the bench. Because one of the biggest issues you're finding with him is the fact that he'd be mouthing off immediately, like in a training camp as a rookie year. He'd be spouting off immediately. And say he remember at that time he would have come out of college, just come out of college and from a senior year or whatever. Oh, this is so easy. This game's so easy, blah, blah, blah. We heard it from Bird, but Bird was one of the rare ones that came through. This time around, though, it's like they would just be aiming at him. People and trade, forget Jordan, forget Bird, forget Dumars, forget all these guys. The Oakley slamming on him. He would first things first is he would be aimed at in training camp. Second of all, someone like an Oakley would absolutely slam him in a preseason game, throw him down in a preseason game because who cares if you kicked out there, And it's one of those things where it's like he'd have a first year where he'd start a little time, that's it, and then he'd be on the bench, and then by second, third year, full time on the bench, and then playing garbage minutes, he'd be out, and then he'd be in the CBA.
Yeah, and one more thing, and I know I'm gonna slide it to football for just a second, but you remember when Justin Fields said, during the preseason his rookie year, like, yeah, I feel like the game is slow to me, and everyone got on him, and then he proceeded last season to rush for 1,000 yards. Is it out of the realm of thought that he was somewhat telling the truth? My point is when you talk like this, you have to be able to back it up. And when you do so at the time period against the Magic, against the Bird, against the Jordan, against Ewing, anybody, if you fall short, you will hear. We talk all the time about what if social media was around back then, right? How ugly it would have been. It probably would have been worse than right now.
Oh, without question. But to bring up Fields real quick, it's slow for him because he is very, very fast. And as far as running, he cannot make a short window play, cannot make a short window pass. Everything has to be wide open or he won't complete it. Last year in 3 and outs in the second half was 41% of the game in the second half of the 3 and out. It was that he can't be able to do that thing. It's either big play or nothing. It's like Michael Vick in his early years. And it's like only Michael Vick won games. So as far as that, but as far as Dylan, see, back in those times, you needed to be respectful. Those are the ones that would have to carry suitcases. They have to carry suitcases. So if he spouted off, there he's out. Period.
Right. Scott, I saw you laughing because you let the Rook mouth off back in like 1985. How long would that have gone over?
All right, you fall into the GMT8 at the moment. So here's
this. I earned this.
All right. Well, you know what? You've earned a lot of things, but that we don't have enough show for me to tell you what you've earned. You'll get your prompts tomorrow. Here's what we're really missing here. How do you think you would have handled with Rick Mahorn? You know what? You ever heard of Brain Damage 101? Okay.
Well, yeah, it'd be preseason, like I said with Oakley.
Right. No, you're wrong. It wouldn't be preseason. It would be all season. Okay. So here, let me preface what I'm going to tell you. Okay. Rick Mahorn, brain damage 101. Bill Lambier, brain damage 102. Carl Malone, brain damage 103. Charles Oakley, brain damage 104. And Dennis Rodman, brain damage 105. You know what end up having? He'd have a headache that Tylenol couldn't get rid of. And I got news for you. He would be run out and he'd be in the CBA inside of 3 years. These are guys, and one of the reasons why this show is as good as it is we're not talking about patty cake, bakers, man, basketball here. We're talking about real basketball, get down and dirty. And none of these guys would get down and dirty. I'm trying to do my best Chris Berman impersonation here. Okay. So the reality, the 5 guys I mentioned, you got a guy, first of all, Memphis doesn't even want him for God's sakes. And he's damaged goods with his reputation anyways around the league during free agency when you hope your bargaining power is higher. So I think all I'll say about this guy is he's more trouble than he's worth. And, there's always a sucker born every minute. We'll see which sucker is born every minute. And then we'll see if they can get him at the Dollar General and Dollar Store price. Because I kind of wonder what exactly he'll be worth. You just
watch him go to the Bulls.
Yeah, well, you never
Watch
know.
him go to the Bulls.
But the bottom line is you don't show up guys that are iconic, which LeBron James is. I may never say he's the greatest of all time, but I'm not saying he's not iconic. Okay,
Yeah.
You don't ever do that because what people seem to fail to understand though is that's called bulletin board material. Some of these guys feed off it. I love when people insult me. I just feed off that stuff because I make them look stupid when it all matters. And I'm not bragging. It's just like it gives me motivation to want to do even better. And we all have to have motivation to what we got to do. But yeah, I know where you, Dens, I tell you, my man, if there's anybody that knows how to just feed it to the Motor City Madmouth, and by the way, I'm getting cats made up for the Motor City Madmouth. I'll have done in about 2 or 3 weeks so you can see it. You don't do this. All right, well, Vogel, you know what? You've been quietly patient about this whole thing. So you know what, Mr. Vogel? I'm going to defer to you. Thank you, Denzel, because I had to get these things done. Otherwise, I'd forget them at my age. All right, Vogel, go ahead.
You guys are exactly right. If he would have spoke even a word to Jordan, even a little, oh, you're going to do nothing, Gordon. You can't do this. Jordan, Bird, Magic, and those guys would have probably dropped 40 to 60 on him. He would have been out of the league in 2 to 3 years. He would have and you know where he belongs? Not in the NBA. He belongs in China. So no one ever has to hear from him ever again, except for the Chinese folks. And guess what else?
He'd get caught with weed.
He would have been riding the tar. He would have been Pine. He would have been sitting next to the bench boy and been like, the bench boy would be like, "Do you get minutes?" He'd be like, "No, I don't." No, he would have been out of the league in 3 years easily.
What, in China?
This guy has no filter.
No. He'd be in China, then caught with some weed and be in jail.
Well, you know what? I hate to tell you this.
But you know what else? The guy just doesn't have a filter, and mouthing off one of the best players of all time and saying, "Oh, you're not going to do much." Dylan Brooks, number 1. Have you watched film on LeBron James? Number 2. Why are you poking a bear will go off on you, and you shoot horrendous, keyword horrendous, from the field that series? You were horrible. You deserve to be released. Dude, you're going to be going to a team that I don't think they'll need you. You'll be the guy on the bench who they'll be like, "Oh, we have a minute left in the game. We're up 30 or 20. Okay, Dylan, you can come in." No, he's not. He's going to be irrelevant in the next few months. Or he already is.
So, Will, can I tell you this? You may think I'm nuts, and you guys all may think I'm nuts after I say this. He's the kind of guy that might be all right in China. I'll tell you why. Number 1.
That's why I said it.
He might be okay in China. Think about it. Trevor Bauer is actually being received well in Japan. Okay. So if this clown could be received in China, of course, he doesn't know their language. So whatever one says won't matter anyways. But still, I don't know. But no, I don't give him 2-3 years here at the rate he's going. So, it's just.
I think he's out soon. He's been.
Well, I think he goes.
Guys, I think that this year is a pivotal year. Either he has to find a coach that's experienced and tells him to grow up, or he'll be out of the league really, really quick. So, all right. So on to our next one, okay? And that's Kyrie Irving. You know what? I'm going to keep a lot of my opinions a little shorter on some of these guys so we can get to them all in a reasonable period of time. Is that fair enough? Because I want to make sure everyone is really worth the attention. Kyrie Irving, number one, doesn't know how to play defense. And, being up from a blue collar area like I am in Detroit, if you don't work, they're going to kill you. So, Kyrie Irving, there's no way in any way, shape, or form that any of these guys would ever tolerate him. And I'll tell you what, let's just use a hypothetical, okay? Let's just say he's on the bad boys, all right? And here's the thing. When Mark Aguirre, at the time before he joined the bad boys, came in, everybody knew they had an interesting reputation in Dallas. And you know what happened? Bill Laimbeer, Rick Mahorn, and Isaiah Thomas said, whatever you did in Dallas, you're not doing it here. And you know what? And how would you like to get that, to me, lectured to you before you even walk in the locker room? Think about it. You think this guy got a chance in the old NBA? I mean, load management, to me, would be worse than an expletive. These people would make sure you really need load management because they're going to beat the daylights out of you is what they'll do to give you a reason to take off. So, I'll just summarize it real quick. No way, Kyrie. I don't even think the Lakers want him right now. LeBron wants him, but the Lakers front office, I don't think so. So Kyrie's best shot might be if nobody's interested. He might have to put his head underneath his legs and go back to Dallas because I think he's killing his reputation with every stop that he makes. But I'm done with Kyrie. I'm turning it over the floor. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around here and go to Denzel, and then I'm going to go to Jacob and then Will, so we keep everything in sync.
I'll keep this short. And since we're talking about the 1980s here.
Right.
So the AIDS virus was discovered in 1982. It wasn't until 1985 it was even acknowledged as a disease after they had claimed 5,000 plus lives. Right. Imagine if Kyrie Irving had come out at that time period and said something like, the virus doesn't exist. How much backlash do you think he would have received? My point, he's way too much trouble off the court than he is on. Play-wise, he would have made it. Right. But just like the last episode that we had like this, why I said Durant wouldn't make it, it's the same way. Ironically, they're best friends, But his play would have made it, but he's too much trouble off the court, And it's neither here nor there picking sides or anything, or whether you agree or not with the statements. It would just cause too much controversy. I'm going to say no, especially on the example I just gave. Not saying that he would do that. I'm just giving an example because his deal on COVID and all the other stuff. Anything that's major that's been affecting human beings, pandemic-wise, whatever, he's had a lot to say about it. And he's fallen under fire, just like Aaron Rodgers has, just like anyone else, any other athlete. Rudy Gobert, who we're going to get to in a little bit, he took it for a joke right when it struck. Remember when he touched all the microphones and everything, and everyone called him an a-hole for it, Right. He's too much trouble off the court than he is on it, and that's why I say no.
Well, talent gets you so far, but at some point or another, you better show up and play. And number two, keep your mouth shut because the only way that you earn endorsements, and a lot of this generation doesn't seem to understand, is that your play gets you endorsements, but if you get into trouble, you lose them. So with that said, Jacob, go ahead.
2 words from basketball, 2 words from football. Let's see, Craig Hodges, and for football, Colin Kaepernick. And the reason I have these in the first place is Craig Hodges, absolutely a firebrand for his moment in the 90s, 90 through 92. He was totally what we see right now, like the first vestiges of Black Lives Matter.
Right.
He was first vestiges. And the minute he was in 92 was over with, out of the league. No one. All of a sudden, he wasn't getting an invite to camp, nothing. They don't know. He doesn't know if it was Jordan or just the league. He wasn't getting there. And here's the funny thing. He was still hitting threes.
Yes, he was.
In 93, he even won a round to try to go for 4 in a row. He even won a round to in the tournament. He had just the regular All-Star, the generic All-Star jersey. He won a round to do that. And then, but it's like, as I said, then seeing he hadn't even had any practice. And then you have Colin Kaepernick, who we already know that. But here's the thing about him. To ask the question, would he have still been in if he was dominating? Because he was starting to fade.
Right.
And then if he was dominating, would he have said anything? There's questions I have with things like this. He's dominant. He had nothing to lose when he did all that.
Right.
Because he was losing his job.
Right.
And it's like, and those are the things I say. It's like that. It was different from the Kaepernick time and the Craig Hodges time. Craig Hodges was still a boom in the league as far as the 3-pointers. He was still a help to the team. He was all that stuff, and they just didn't want the distraction. Kaepernick, he's probably still in the league if he dominates. But my question is, would he have said much of anything if he was dominant? Got to remember, during the Super Bowl year, during everything, short hair, perfect talk, all that stuff. Said all the right things in the media, all that kind of thing. Then all of a sudden he was about to lose his job. And then it happened. And I'm like, I wonder if he went up on himself, did he do it because he was about to lose his job? I just wonder. It's just curious.
Well, you know what, Jake, you're going to bring that up. You must bring up Ray Rice, because if the guy was a superstar, do you think that he would have gotten a little bit longer leash than he did? I mean, once he did that thing with his other half and it all came out, he was blackballed. Nobody would ever bring him on again. When you're blackballed in the NBA, it's a shame, or the NFL or wherever you get blackballed. I mean, think about it. For some reason, Mark Jackson should be a coach, right? And I'm still trying to wonder why he never got a second chance. Listen, I'm not smart enough to make that assessment, but there were some good jobs out there, even the ones where he could have turned around, like the Pistons, and yet he never got hired. So, your points, Jacob, are really, really good. But the thing is, if a guy is mega talented, think about it. Does he have a longer leash? And that, all right, well, go ahead, because that's going to lead me to my next player. Go ahead, Will.
So yeah, he's got the talent. He's got great ball skills. He's got a good shot. He can do the basketball stuff. Thing that drives me insane is that he was in Cleveland. He wins a ring with LeBron. LeBron leaves. He's like, I don't need LeBron. Then he goes to Boston, does whatever. Then he gets booed, and he's like, at first he was like, I'm so happy I'm here, and then he's like, man, I hate it here. And then he goes to Brooklyn. Man, I love it here. Man, I hate it here. And then he goes to Dallas. I think he's ruining Luka Doncic's career, even though Luka said he loves playing with him.
Good
but
point.
the things off the court saying, oh, I love it here, and being two-faced like, oh, I love it here. Oh, no, actually, I hate it. You get killed for that. And it's so two-facery. It drives me insane. So, no, I don't think he has the skill to make it his play. His play does the talking. His other stuff, like, I'm going to stay, and then a few moments later, oh, I'm going to leave. Coaches hate stuff like that.
Well, you make an interesting point, Will. Okay, so let me go ahead and talk about this. Mark Cuban still wants to bring this guy back, but I agree that I think he's ruining Luka Doncic's career, and I'm going to leave it at that, because now I want to go to our next one, is Ben Simmons. I'll start with these comments, and I want to feed off of every one of you. That way we keep everything in sync. Ben Simmons can't even make it in this area because he can't stay on the picking court, and he can't shoot to begin with. He doesn't have a good overall game, and his reasons for missing excuses, the automobile industry couldn't even make cars with the amount of excuses this guy has. I mean, they really couldn't. I mean, I've never seen a guy who's a bag of excuses, but Ben Simmons, give me a break. I mean, Doc Rivers attempts to coach you, and then all of a sudden the baby got his feelings hurt. I want out of Philly. Okay. Well, as my one-time math instructor back in junior high named Mrs. Pulley would say, close your lips. Okay. Although, she really did when some of the class people wrote that. Close your lips. But you know what? Just Ben Simmons. And now he's obviously his fresh start in Brooklyn has been as bad as his first start in Philly. And, I think I'm sure that everybody in New Jersey is thinking, how do we get this guy out of here? I mean, and if he can't make it in this area, okay, I'll summarize it and then turn it over. He certainly didn't make it back then, because these guys would kick him in the head as much as some teams would use trash cans in an attempt to go ahead and beat the system. Sorry, Denzel, but I had no choice. Well, with the Houston Astros, but this guy's head would get beaten up worse in the old era worse than the trash cans did. At least the trash cans won you a championship, and that nobody can give you a hard time. They'll never take it away. But Ben Simmons would get hammered in that area, and he may not even make it in this one. I give him maybe about 1 or 2 more years, and you know where he ends up? He's going to be playing Australian basketball.
3-on-3.
yeah.
3-on-3 league.
Yeah, well, whatever. 3-on-3 or play basketball in Australia where he can do whatever he wants. But I don't give him another 1 or 2 more years at the rate he's going. All right, Dennis, go ahead.
When you lose, it's one thing to lose a playoff series because you didn't make enough shots. It's another thing to lose a playoff series because you got out coached, and that's not on the player. It's another thing to lose a playoff series because you ran the wrong plays or whatever.
Right.
When you lose a playoff series because you are scared to shoot the ball, you ain't gonna make it in any era. Jacob, go ahead.
Got it. You got that right.
Mike drop.
Here's the big thing with him also, and I'll say this, Denzel. Let me say this with him. His type of game, if you get it out of college, let's just say this for a second. What people would say in the 80s, with 80s and something like that, the initial would have been Magic because of being 6'10". The initial, that's what the thought process would have been. Big issue there's a couple issues. I'm gonna give the logistics part of this. There wasn't another team in the league that would have the system for another Magic Johnson. For a thing like Ben to be able to do that. So right then and there, even if he's well behaved, he isn't going to make it. They're going to turn him straight into a power forward, which he is not anywhere near built for. Even though he's 6'10" with muscle, he is not built for it. Second of all, depression, and he brings up depression all the time. Depression and anxiety did not exist in that time. Period. End of story. And what you were saying, if you can't make it then, now you can't make it then. You're right, but guess what? He now talks about the anxiety and depression, which is more talked about now than ever. Plus, you couldn't do weed back then, which is now more than ever. So he would definitely not make it because he would have nothing to hold back on. They wouldn't let him sit out. They wouldn't let him go play, at the time, Pong. They wouldn't let at the time Pong or Donkey Kong. They wouldn't let him play any of those. Stay home. He'd have to play all the games, and then it's one of those things. His anxiety. It would just, and you never know what would happen after that. So absolutely not.
Go ahead, Will.
The guys hit it on the head. You get past the ball and you're open, and you expect coach and those guys, your teammates expect you to shoot the ball. They shout to you, shoot, 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 shoot. And you don't shoot. You freeze up. Your brain freezes. Your body freezes. And you're like looking all around. You're like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? You don't have that much time to react. You either shoot it or pass it. And he passes it way too much. Doesn't have a jump shot. Yes, he gets rebounds. Yes, he gets assists. But this guy, in a shooting era, doesn't even have a jump shot, and that's just sad. And he would have gotten killed for it. A coach, if he was past the ball in the 80s and 90s, and he was wide open, and it was like a game-winning shot, and he was like freezing, like mental, like sweating, and like just stressed. Man, a coach would have been like, called the timeout. He would have been like, you're going to the bench. You do not belong on this team. You are freezing up in the clutchest moments. Yeah, right. No chance he lasts.
Well, number one, here's the thing. Okay, you do make a couple interesting points, Will. He wouldn't be on a team back in that era. Period.
Forget about the coach. Hold on. He wouldn't have been drafted.
Well, I don't know about that because other foreigners have been. But here's the point. You're right there, though, Will. You really, really are. He wouldn't have been on a team back then. Heck, he's struggling in this year, in this era. What makes you think he'd be on a team back then? And he would never sit on the bench back then because he'd never be on one. So think about it. So all right,
he'd be on the floor next to the bench.
Yeah, yeah. You know where he'd be on the floor? Probably buying tickets there to watch it and pay some money out of his pocket because he wouldn't be anywhere else. So
exactly.
So I should point out, tune into via Sideline Sports on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, DB TV, and Stream TV. I want to make sure we get that out there. So in case you guys are joining us, that's great. All right, on to
the new owner of Stream TV, right there, Denzel.
There you go, Stream. I had to make sure we got out there, D. There you go. All right, well, a guy who should be on Stream TV, I'm just kidding with you, is a guy that really likes to get into the boxing game. Is called Jordan Poole. Mess around.
He's like Greg Hardy. He's as good as Greg Hardy.
Oh God!
Right.
Don't remind me. I'm a Panther fan.
Hardy
There you
actually
go.
won a match in UFC, but go ahead.
Yeah,
All
I
right,
know.
All right, so let's go to Jordan Poole. He signs a big contract earlier in the year. Gets into a little bit of a thing with Draymond Green. As Gomer Pyle would say, shame, shame, shame. So he gets a bag full of cash, underperforms, and all of a sudden the Warriors have a headache. And if that isn't bad, their former GM and president Bob Myers decided to leave anyways. Personally, Jordan Poole possibly could make it if he has a hard-nosed size, but really, I really truly doubt that he would. Again, you're going out there and fighting with your teammates in this area, which I know is a very soft area. So I would say there is no way Jordan Poole could cut it. Denzel, take it from me.
Oh man, my apologies in advance. It's going to be another short take. If you got knocked out by a guy that we said last episode wouldn't make it back then, what do you think the Knicks and the Pistons are going to do to you back then?
Right.
Jacob!
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I still think Draymond Green would make it back then because he plays defense and he's physical. So even 2 weeks later, I still believe in it, even though I was outnumbered in this panel 3-1. All right, go ahead, Jacob.
Got to realize the reason people aren't as tough anymore is because they don't have to be anymore. It's like just the way I said, lawyers and agents run this league now. They run all of our leagues now. But so even in this case right now, he just got he got his clock cleaned by Draymond Green. Now, just imagine in the 80s, it's like, and I'm just telling you right now, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, he could fight. He was trained. Larry Bird absolutely could fight. He fought in bars. During finals, he fought in bars. He knocked some people clean out. You get the whole of Detroit, the whole of New York from facing Oakley. And I've always talked about not Oakley, but he could still hold his own. It's like I just named probably 10 players right off the bat, and that's 4 teams. There's going to be more. And it's like, no, he wouldn't make it in the league because he gets his clock absolutely cleaned. Because if you have an attitude, unless he went over there and decided to have a complete change of heart and be a professional, actually carry bags and did all that kind of stuff, then you could probably use him off the bench. But other than that, with the attitude, say he had the attitude there, I mean, he'd get his butt kicked every game.
Okay, Will.
Oh yeah, like imagine picking a fight with Rodman and those guys. You'd be kicked off the team.
Rodman's
He'd be like, "You're not even." The coach would be like, "Get off the team. You don't even deserve a roster spot." Imagine if he picked a fight with Chuck Daly and be like, "Billy beat me up." Chuck Daly wouldn't care. He'd be like, "That's the hard-nosed team of my team. Get off my team. You are a soft guy who thinks he's tough. No way he makes the NBA." Chuck Daly would be like, "Are you sure you signed up for the right team? Get off my team."
He knew exactly what I was talking about.
I made Scott laugh.
He knew what he was talking about. He'd be combing his hair while Jordan was crying. Okay.
He'd be like, "Whatever, Bill, go beat him up out back."
Yeah.
You talk about Chuck Daly. I work with this guy.
I had to.
I know, and you know there's no way to put up with his antics and
I
all.
love
But,
Chuck Daly.
I do too, and he was great to work with. So you want me to tell you?
I made him laugh.
And I'll tell you one thing about Chuck. Well, I'll tell you guys another time about. I got another idea for a topic, but we'll go ahead and stay on point. So, yeah, I know how Chuck Daly. There's no way that this guy would even make it with Chuck.
You'd be like, "You're
done
naming
with
the next boat
listen,
out of town."
Vogel, the only thing you haven't done is you haven't got me to lose my cap like Jeremy Ballreich does when something really is excessively funny. I won't give you that much, but you were on point there. All right. Well, you know what? We alluded to Rudy Gobert, so I feel we need to, since we're talking about the fact that he did not take the COVID-19 thing seriously. And you know what? Anytime you think that, number one, a trade of that magnitude for this guy would never have even happened back then in the old NBA, I don't think he was good enough for half of what they got. I personally think the Utah Jazz got hosed. Actually hosed the Timberwolves is what they did to bring him on. But his antics right when COVID-19 hit with the banging of the microphone, boy, you know what? He'd have a hit on him back in the old NBA for doing that. And remember, we're talking at a time when Magic Johnson had HIV, and he wanted to play, and then everybody's worried about the blood, and all of a sudden, he played the All-Star game, got named the MVP, so that's LA story like. But Rudy Gobert, you try something like that in the old NBA, and you know what, you would have a hit on you as well. I don't really care for the guy. I don't think he's as good as they think he is. I think Minnesota could have done a little better, but hey, they thought they needed a big name guy. I'm sure he probably sells out the Target Center, and they can make money off of him and his play. I'm not saying he's a bad player, but you think you start messing around with health in any era, you'll be in trouble back then because they didn't tolerate anything. All right, then.
Oh man, he's one. This is just me, but he's one of the worst defensive players of the years in recent memory. You
Right.
know, and I'll just leave it at this.
Well, let me tell you, back in the old days, defense was what it was all about. I think, from what I remember, didn't Tom Thibodeau's New York Knicks team hold Cleveland to 80 points at one time during the year? I'll tell you, Tom did.
That sounds right.
I think he did. So defense was so heavily looked upon back then, and that's why you had a lot of teams that would be winning multiple titles in a row. And Tom Thibodeau, I think he's great, but there's no way Rudy Gobert's defense would hold up back then. He'd get slapped around like silly putty.
I'll put it to you like this.
Go ahead.
There was some guy that we talked about maybe 2 segments ago named Ben Simmons.
Right.
What date was that? Oh, February 15th of 2021. Ben Simmons gave Rudy Gobert 42 points. Out of 250 plus career games that Ben Simmons ever played to that point, that was the only time he had crossed 30 points. He gave Rudy Gobert 42 points. I want everyone to let that sink in.
And while you do it, make sure you put about 5 exclamation points if you're a writer on it too. All right, exclamation points. All right, and do 5 of them. All right, Jacob.
The thing, here's what he would be. He would be what he would attempt to be right off the bat would be like the more athletic Mark Eaton. He'd be trying to block shots. But you brought up Ben Simmons yourself about getting 42 on him after all those kind of things. There are just so many, and you got to remember there was the mid range. They would just smoke him on the mid range.
Right.
And plus here's another thing. Could you imagine? We got to remember the whole situation he had with what was it, Duran? Basically during the whole COVID thing, I think kissed him on the lips or something.
Yeah.
Or tried to. Imagine doing that to Harvey Grant.
Oh God.
Imagine trying that with Harvey Grant.
Or Dennis Rodman.
Yeah, well, Rodman, yeah. I mean, Rodman would have, but okay, we'll say another one, okay, the Lambeer.
Right.
Mahorn.
Well, there you go. Now you're speaking my language.
Yeah. Imagine doing that to them. And it's like, let's just say these were men. Yeah. These were grown men. It's like there wasn't a lot of show muscle out there. The show muscles. There wasn't a lot of those, but those were country strong boys. And there was no time. See, the whole thing about this era, there was no time to be a distraction. He wouldn't have made the thing because there's no time to be a distraction. Right. You have to play, or you have to play, or you lose your way, or you lose your way. You lose your job, you lose your everything. That's the reason people were tough. They just were. It's because if you didn't get tough, you lose your spot. And so he would have done that.
All right, finish it up, Will.
He would have been a distraction on and off the court. Number one, that whole COVID thing where he touched all the mics and said, "Oh, COVID's not real." Yes, it was. What if that happened during the AIDS time of Magic Johnson, HIV? Oh, man, David Stern would have fined him and suspended him and be like, that's no joking matter. You are making fun of a deadly disease and you're making fun of another player. Get out, or he would have been thrown out of the league. Number 2, on the court, man, you know what Chuck Daly, again, I'm bringing up Chuck Daly, would say to him? Are you a bad boy Pistons? No, you're a fake bad boy Piston. Lambeer and him would elbow Lambeer, Mahorn, Dumars, Rodman. Oh man, in the paint, he would have been elbowed in the ribs and he would have been like, oh man, this is too much. Oh man, blah, blah, blah. And then off the court, he'd be like, man, I'm so tough. I wasn't hurt. I was just pretending. No. He would have gotten killed by those tough, hard-nosed players because that guy is the fakest defensive player and fakest tough boy ever. Like, no, he's
Besides LeBron.
yeah. Go ahead.
One thing I want to clear up. One thing I want to clear up with your point. You have a good point, but I have one thing to clear up. Him doing that with AIDS during that time, it was 9 years before the whole thing with Magic came around, and then 3 years after the thing. So if he would have said that early, they probably would have believed him. With COVID, he did it one day after COVID was brought.
I meant like if he did it around.
Right. It's like he did it one day after they announced COVID. And the thing was, truthfully, that was 50-50 if it was real. See, I'm just going to bring this really, really fast to you guys with COVID, and you're completely correct. It was real, and it's completely real. 3 years worth. But here's the thing to be understood. It's the fact that when the media, and this is why I hate them, goes code red 10,000 on 2 scoops of ice cream from Donald Trump, then it's hard for anybody to believe how real it is in the first place. Because we don't need to code red everything. And that's why it wasn't believed, because that's probably why he believed himself. Because they code red everything.
All right. We've got a little bit of time left, so let's just blow through these last ones. We're going to go with Kawhi Leonard. You have to talk about him. I'll just make my point shorter. I want to make sure we get to each and every one of these. Kawhi Leonard, to me, purely talented. His talent would be great back in the old days. His main issue right now is injury. He's injury prone, and that's it. I have no problem with his game. He's a leader. He's a clutch performer in the playoffs. I'm okay, but availability, to me, he would never make it. So I'm done with Kyrie. You guys take it from there. We have a few more left to go.
You want me to go real quick, or no?
Yeah, go ahead. No, that's okay. You can do it.
Oh no.
Well, all right,
go ahead.
Well, you asked, so now you get to go. All right, no problem.
Are you sure? I feel bad.
Yes.
Oh no,
Yes,
not at all. But the longer you waffle, I'll feel bad. So go ahead.
I'll be real fast.
Okay.
The best ability is availability. This guy is so load management. Imagine Phil Jackson and these coaches this era, and Kawhi's like playing with a good team, and then okay, Kawhi, we need you to play. I don't want to. I've got a hurt knee. I've got a hurt ankle. I've got a hurt wrist. He's a great defensive player. Defensive player of the year once. He has a semi-good offensive game, pretty good offensive game. When he's on the court, he's great. When he's off the court, he makes up excuses, load management.
Right.
I would say his play does the talking, yes, but coaches would get sick of the load management and be like, okay, you're on the trade block now.
Well said. All right, Denzel.
And you guys hit it. I think had it been around in the 80s, it would have been just a waste of talent. I mean, he's been regarded as one of the best two-way players in the last 10 years. Regarded one of the best perimeter defenders since Pimpin. But it's the load management thing. And when you're not out there, you're not producing. That's going to get in a lot of coaches' heads to, maybe go the other way about things and move on from him. And it's a shame, because whenever you have that reputation of, I'm just going to take off whenever I feel like it, and then also at the same time he is injury prone and whatnot, that's what's going to get into a lot of people's heads. Whenever front offices are whenever you're going for that big contract, right? That's the type of stuff that they look at. Before they sign you to big money, okay, well, first of all, do you even show up? Second of all, do you even show up in games? Third of all, how's your injury history? This is a lot of, and this is why, people have to start thinking, and shout out to Jacob for this one. They got to start thinking like the front office in this one,
Right.
So before Kawhi even, asks for that big deal, that's what they're going to look at. You're talented, but you're never around. That's why he wouldn't make it in the 80s or 90s.
Okay, Jacob, you got final word on
this?
Yeah,
the biggest thing is the idea of load management in the 80s when you took a big old dump at halftime. That was just that was the biggest. That was what that was in the day. There was no load management.
That was inappropriate, but that was fun.
But no, it's just true. But it's like that's what load management was. But here's the question: if his knees are as bad as he says he is, would he? If there was no load management, would he be the Bernard King of this day?
Yes.
It's like because Bernard King missed 3 total seasons. 2 and then the thing, until the end. He has 3 total seasons with his knees. You have to wonder. See, Kawhi, he wouldn't be doing load management during that time. His skills, absolutely, positively, but would he be the Bernard King?
Jacob,
Blow his knee out and do all that if he played 47 minutes.
Me personally, I say no. I'll summarize this, and then if you have one more comment, we've got a few more to go. Is this the physicality of the old NBA would absolutely eat this guy up alive? Period. If he thinks he needed load management today, hello, Charlie. Okay, it would be a whole lot worse. He'd be like in a Shark Tank, eaten up by a bunch of great white sharks, because that's how rough it was. And I don't know. I had courtside seats. So all right, well, one more thing. We got 3 more players.
Yeah, I know. Jacob, who was the guy you said went from like 30 points per game, and then at the end of his career it was like 1 point something?
That was Moses Malone.
Would he be
all right,
Moses Malone-ish?
Yeah, that's all well and good.
Different game.
Yeah, all right. So let's move on to the next one. We talked about Trae Young. I don't think the guy's coachable. So if you're not coachable in this era, good luck thinking you're going to be coachable back then when the coaches are a whole lot better. I'll just say Trae Young, not coachable, would never make it. And then Denzel, you and I are the master of short and sweet comments. So unless you want to go longer, go ahead. Trae Young, no way.
I'm on the same page. He's too defiant. He's too defiant, and not only in his play style, but he already managed to get one coach fired, run him out of town. Right. So and I know Jacob has ranted on about this, and he's probably going to rant again on his feelings on Trae Young, and everything is justified. I mean, the only thing is I think they would have got rid of him back then sooner than right now.
All right, go ahead, Jacob.
Well, I ran on it because I wanted Luka to begin with. I hated that trade. Because I was watching Luka on the YouTube versions of the European basketball during that.
Same.
Yeah, I was watching Luka. I wanted him in Atlanta. I was getting ready to get tickets, and then they did the dang trade. And I talked to Atlanta Hawks people. It was completely and utterly. I mean, they have told me it's completely and utterly politics. Why they did that in the first place, and it's unfortunate thing. But I'll tell you this. Right now, while Luke is on that thing, they can rectify themselves and bring Luka back. Okay, they don't trade for him. Why? I mean, because he'd be huge in Atlanta.
So, Will, you already got your words in on this one, right? Or not?
No, he didn't.
All right, go ahead.
4 words for you: uncoachable, ego too big.
Good enough. Speaking of Luka Doncic, we'll go ahead and segue to him. All right, me personally. No way. And the reason why I say no Luka Doncic is, you know what? You can't go out there and yell at the officials to look for every stinking call on the planet, and your teammates will hammer you because they never allowed anybody to get out of control. You have to show a lot more self-control then, and the game was a lot more. If he's whining about calls now, can you imagine what it would have been like then when everything was more physical? I'll just say defining no way for Luka back in the 80s. All right, then.
Oh, crazy, because I think he's the one out of this whole list who has the best chance of making it, though he wouldn't. And Jacob, we've talked about this, about how Shannon Sharp called him Baby Bird, the closest thing to Larry Bird, and then you laughed at it. Remember that time? Good times.
Yeah. I don't like it because it's 2 different type of defenses. He's a better one-on-one guy than Bird, but Bird would just had better instincts. No, I'm talking about one-on-one defense is better than Bird. Bird was he was, what was the thing? Free safety. Bird was a free safety waiting for plays. He wasn't much of a, he didn't have the feet to be able to do the one-on-one plays, which is fine. But it's like, but Bird had so much more instincts in the game than Luka does. It's like, but I will tell you what Luka would do in the 80s. He'd be watching, you'd be thinking of the Jokic of now. And you think of Bird, he'd be doing perimeter passes and the long distance passes during that time. He'd be the one person other than Bird doing that in the first place. So that's what he'd be doing. And of course he could shoot, but they only shot 1 or 2 3-pointers at a time. So you're now looking. There was no problem with Larry in those times because Bird only shot 1 or 2 a game and proud of it because he wanted the better shot. These guys want to shoot now, so they wouldn't know what to do with that. They don't know. You've got to remember. They steal the ball, then have 3 guys waiting on the perimeter. They don't go in. So it's like it's a different game, so he'd have to learn different.
I agree. Totally. All right, go ahead, Will.
Yeah, he's got a wild shot, and he also doesn't know to space the floor. He really doesn't. He just takes shots from wherever.
Right.
His fadeaway is not great either. His inside game, he rushes shots. He literally, if he goes for a layup and he thinks he gets fouled and he misses, and on the other lane, and I love Luka, don't get me wrong. I watched him when he played in Europe on YouTube as well. But if you're like miss a layup and you think you get fouled, and the team's playing defense and you're just jawing with the ref on the way back, your team's probably like, "What the heck are you doing?
Right.
Help us play defense." Yeah. No, of the list, yes, Luka would make it, but I would still say no.
Yeah, the thing I'll say again is you can't argue with the officials then, let alone the fact you think you're going to get away with it now, because your reputation supersedes you. And then here's the thing about it, okay? That wasn't an all thing time where you could shoot every time you get to basketball. There was a lot more teamwork involved. All right, let's go ahead and talk about Zion Williams. And I'll tell you why this one's easy, okay? This was Sam Bowie written all over it. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Well, does it ever have Sam Bowie written all over it? I can tell you lack of availability. And to me, he's as fragile as a piece of glass.
Oh,
if this piece of glass couldn't make it now, what do you think would happen then? And I'll say one more. Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall and had a big fall. If you want to define Zion Williamson's career, that's all I have to say about it.
Oh, my God.
So there you go, Denzel. I want to make sure that I keep my comments shorter so we can get to everything on the program. All right. So I'm just going to rename Zion Williamson Humpty Dumpty. All right.
I'm so done.
You mentioned Sam Bowie, and I say Greg Oden, but in the same plane, in the same plane, definitely he's too brittle. But also at the same time, teams would have been way less tolerant about his weight issue. Because for the longest time, they've had him listed at 285. I think that they did not want to admit they had a 300-pound small forward.
Right.
No, so, 325 easy.
So that, yeah, you know what I mean? So, I mean, it's one thing for a center to be that, but, whenever they kind of get heavier, like as the position goes, like 1 through 5, but a 300-pounder at the 3, that's unheard of. They would have been way less tolerant about his weight issues, back then. So and he's brittle. So there's that. Jacob.
Well, yeah. You know what? You know why they have strength and conditioning coaches to make sure this guy's not eating too much of McDonald's is what he's doing. Go ahead.
Well, in that era, he'd be that era Stanley Roberts and John Hot Plate Williams.
Good point.
It's just the truth. It's like you got to remember the reason he loses weight, gains weight, loses weight, gains weight. And that's because he has a strength and conditioning coach. They didn't have the strength and conditioning coaches then, which is why a Stanley Roberts gained all that weight, a Hot Plate Williams gained all that weight. It was all that stuff because they just scarfed down. McDonald's, KFC. They scarf it down all the time. And you got to realize they didn't put those kind of guys that I announced did not put all the effort in the world on the court. To be able to keep the weight off. So it's like, see, that kind of the biggest issue is he'd be better skill wise than those guys I announced. Better skill wise, he's got tremendous footwork. Problem is that during that time there was no strength and conditioning coaches of any, it was just of any substance. Right, so he would have put the weight on and been out of the league.
One more player after this, Will, if you can try to just
go ahead. Guys, he's the mound round of rebound. But the key word is round. The guy is a big boy. This guy's 300-something pounds. He's the round part of the mound round of rebound. He is the round part. Seriously, this guy has weight issues. He needs to figure out how to lose that, because this is only hurting your career endorsements and other things. No way he makes it.
All right, our last player, Vanessa Williams, had a song called Save the Best for Last. I'm going to say save the worst for last, and that's James Harden. So all I can tell you is he would go ahead and be a cancer on any team then, and he certainly is one now. So to me, James Harden, to me, is as overpaid, and he's more trouble than he's worth than any player I have ever seen in my career covering this league, ever. Number one, I can't be any more emphatic as James Harden. The NBA will be better when you decide to retire because you're more trouble than you're worth, and I can't stand you. All right. Tell me how you really feel, Scott Morganroth.
Jacob.
I don't know. I already said enough. Go ahead, Denzel.
His game now just doesn't fit then. It wasn't a 3-point shooting time period, which is how he makes his bones, in today's game. He's got to drive to the lane a whole lot. Now, one thing James Harden does know how to do is get to the line. The thing is when you're driving in with those big dogs from back then, you're going to get hurt when you get fouled. Okay. And it's a question of will he last? I will be able to withstand it. I'm going to say no, simply because the game just doesn't fit. Go ahead, Jacob.
One of the greatest ISO players we've ever seen, which is what we know. That's the big thing. That's not a 3-point shooting league. And remember, he would drive and you say he goes to the line. I'm just saying this based off. I say what I say about him, but I've also have said 1,000 times one of the greatest ISOs we've ever seen. But here's an issue: his strip club things, and there was those in the '80s also. He'd be a cocaine addict. He'd be a cocaine addict in that time because that's all there were at strip clubs. And then he'd be a Roy Tarpley. And then he'd be a Roy Tarpley and a Michael Ray Richardson. He'd get caught with cocaine and be out 60 games and then out for a year and then out. See, that'd be the issue just because in that time you just have that thought process of cocaine when you're out there. Yeah, I mean, everybody had that part. But see, these are the biggest things. These are the biggest things we have to think of. It's the fact, could he score 20 at the line? Absolutely, he could. But you got to remember, they didn't call fouls so easily then either. So right. He might. I could see him as 17-point guy. It's like he ain't going to shoot threes like crazy, but mid-range guy would be automatic.
Okay.
Problem would be the cocaine that would eventually happen because of strip clubs.
I hate to do this. Well, if you can get your comment out in 25 seconds.
Yeah, I got you. Guy would need to learn how to drive the lane, and he couldn't with those big dogs. He wouldn't make it. Done. 5 seconds.
Good. Boy, I'll tell you, you're doing good. Well, all right, with that said,
sorry about that, guys.
All I can tell you is James Harden is cancer in any era, and I'll turn it over to Denzel.
Yeah. Well, outside of that, that's it. We got to wrap. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Close us out, Scott.
All right. Well, once again, everybody, thank you very much for joining us on part 2 of our incredible, and we're going to be doing a lot more lists, so stay tuned here on Sideline Sports. And all I'll say is Sideline Sports and South Florida Tribune make great partners. We're all set. See you next Sunday.